It depends is for sure my go-to answer for pretty much everything. And I think it's frustrating for people sometimes because they're like, it depends on what though? What does it depend on? And it's like, it depends on literally everything. So I think thinking about, does this make sense for me right now, is a really helpful question to ask when you're making any food decision.
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today we have Jamie Nadeau on the podcast to help answer some questions. Jamie, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into some of our questions and our high and low segment, I'd love for you to take a couple minutes and just tell everybody who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jamie. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian for almost 10 years, and now I share a lot of nutrition tips and recipes on social media, and I run a food and nutrition blog.
We are so excited to have you help answer some questions today. Before we get into some of those questions, we'll do our high and low segment where we share just a little bit about our week, some of the highs, some of the parts of our week we wish had gone a little bit differently. Reilly, as always, can you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll start off with high for this week. This one actually happened within the last 2 hours. We've been really working hard on the RBSN library, which is our downloadable resources for athletes, dietitians, and other health professionals. We've been working really hard for the last couple of months, and we got an email today from a dietitian who joined one of our bundles, and it was in all caps. She was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." So it was just really nice to see that she was happy with the resource and that she's also finding it valuable. So definitely a high. And then the low is a little bit of a story. I'm living in Charleston, South Carolina. And if you're not familiar with Charleston, we live on kind of like the water. We're a beach city. And my neighborhood backs up to the Sound, and we have a dock that kind of goes out to the Sound. We have a Facebook page for the community. I feel like we all have those next door apps, things like that. And this morning we have, tides, things like that. And this morning the tide came in, and with it brought a casket that got stuck on our dock. I never thought I would be sharing a story like this. So that's definitely a low. We don't really know if it was full or anything like that, but there's a casket floating on the dock in our neighborhood.
That's wild. That's like something out of a movie.
I'll keep you updated. I'm kind of freaked out.
Yeah, let us know. Jamie, what about you? High and low for the week?
My high this week is around the weather because I live in Massachusetts, so it's been really cold and it's been really windy recently, but the weather is starting to take a turn slowly. So this week it's in the 50s and the sun is coming out, and I'm very excited because I need some sun. I'm so ready to be done with the winter. And then my low of the week is just that I have a sick child, and it's the worst.
Oh no. Well, hopefully everybody starts to feel better soon and that springtime comes very quickly for y'all up there. My high and low for the week. My high is that we have some good friends of ours who live in Colorado, and they are down in Arizona for about 2 months every year for work. And they're here right now. So we've gotten to see them a couple of times, and it's just really great to see familiar faces here in Arizona from back home in Colorado. My low for the week is my sweet dog, George. So every couple hours, he and I walk to the end of our street. And the other day I took him out to do that. And he's a very friendly golden retriever. So if he sees anybody walking towards him, he wants to stop and say hello. I see an elderly gentleman walking towards us. Of course, we have stopped near the grass, which happens to be, if you were to be driving on the sidewalk, the wrong side of the road. And we are standing there waiting for him because George wants to wait for this man to pass. And he started yelling at me that I was standing on the wrong side of the road because I had inconvenienced him and he needed to quote unquote cross the sidewalk to then walk around us. So that was a really unusual thing that happened. But at the end of the day, I kind of have to sit back and remember that I have no idea what was going on in his day. And maybe he was having a really tough day, and me standing on the wrong side of the road just wasn't good for him. So also a good reminder that I just need to be more mindful, I guess, of which side of the road I am, or which side of the sidewalk, I guess, I'm walking my dog on.
Poor George.
He was so upset. He was probably more upset that he didn't get to say hi to someone than I was upset that I got yelled at.
Oh, I can't believe someone could yell at you. No way.
Just a different day.
Maybe he was having a bad day. We don't know. Well, Jamie, we're so excited to have you on. You have such fun recipes and snack plates and things like that on Instagram and TikTok. So we're really excited for you to be on for us to pick your brain and for you to share some of your tips with the athletes that are listening.
Yeah, I'm super excited too.
What strategies do you recommend for simplifying meal planning and preparation for individuals with maybe busier schedules or limited cooking skills?
I think that one of the most helpful things when it comes to just simplifying meal planning and eating in general is just, especially if you have limited cooking skills or a busy schedule or whatever the case may be, is just leaning into easy meals and figuring out sort of what works the best for you at that moment in time for you, because a lot of people have these like predisposed feelings about my meals need to look like this, or they need to be home cooked meals all the time and that kind of a thing. And they really just don't. There are so many ways that we can make healthy, balanced meals out of things that don't need to be cooked or need minimal cooking or are more convenient, like microwave veggies or rotisserie chicken or Greek yogurt or whatever it is. There's so many really minimal prep stuff that we can incorporate. So I think that leaning into that and just meeting yourself where you're at is super helpful.
I'm so glad you brought up the rotisserie chicken, because that's one I've been seeing a lot on social media, people saying that that's something that we should avoid, but it's one of my favorite like convenient protein sources that I can pick up at the grocery store when I'm having a little bit busier of a week. So how do you help people navigate like that social media influence of maybe these convenience foods not being quote unquote healthy and still incorporating them into a very balanced, like you said, fueling plan?
Yeah, I think rotisserie chicken is such a good example of that, because I think that, no one would argue that making your own whole chicken at home isn't the quote unquote healthier option, but I think convenience still plays a big role in helping us to be more consistent with our eating and that kind of a thing. So if having rotisserie chicken is the difference between you having a balanced meal or not, it's worth it for sure, because a lot of times we try to avoid these particular foods. Maybe it's rotisserie chicken or something else. And then you have no plan or an unrealistic plan. And then when it's time to make a food choice, you end up making a more mindful food choice versus just going with the more convenient thing.
Your balanced approach is so easy, realistic, and like simple, but it can be really overwhelming, especially for somebody who is used to tracking every single calorie or tracking macros. So for individuals like that, athletes who are maybe struggling with some of those calorie counting habits, what are some tips to maybe move towards a more balanced approach?
Yeah, I think that can be so tough. And I think it really depends. Everyone is a little bit different when it comes to this, but if you're trying to get away from tracking and away from numbers, and it's something that you've done for a long time, I think one of the most helpful things that you can do is really sort of reflect on your experience with tracking and numbers and that sort of thing, because sometimes you feel like I have to track, I have to hit these numbers every single day or I'm not going to be successful. And really thinking about, how has that affected my relationship with food, my actual success? Is it something that's actually effective for me, or is it making me more obsessed with food? Really thinking about, what is it really doing for me? I think that's so powerful, because a lot of the time you think and you're like, you know what, it's actually not helping me to do anything better or healthier because it's making me feel crazy about food. So I think that's one thing that's really helpful. And then when it comes to balanced meals too, I think just knowing that you don't have to use numbers if you don't want to. When it comes to nutrition and balanced meals, you can just think about sort of the quality of your diet and what's on your plate versus numbers. So for balanced meals, what I like to think about is making sure I have a good protein source, making sure I have a carbohydrate source on there, preferably high fiber if it's, if it makes sense in that moment, and then having some color on my plate. So at breakfast, that probably looks like fruit. At lunch and dinner, that's more likely to look like vegetables. And of course, we would like to see the vegetables be a good portion of your plate for sure at lunch and dinner, if it makes sense. That's such a great way to sort of just simplify your meal. And then you can just look at it and say, okay, I have a protein, I have a carb, I have some color on here. And then you can sort of use information from there and learn which meals make the most sense for you and keep you full. You might eat a meal and say, you know what, I think I needed more carb next time or whatever. So I think that can be really helpful to get away from the tracking while still giving nutrition some focus and still honoring that, because I think we all want to eat nutritious, healthy foods, but numbers aren't the only way that you can do that.
Something that I love that you said was, if it makes sense. We always talk about on this podcast, like, it depends, but I love the phrasing, like, if it makes sense, because everybody's so different and it makes sense for different people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it depends is for sure my go-to answer for pretty much everything. and I think it's frustrating for people sometimes because they're like, it depends on what though? What does it depend on? And it's like, it depends on literally everything. So I think thinking about, does this make sense for me right now, is a really helpful question to ask when you're making any food decision.
I love that. We have a lot of athletes that listen to this podcast. So what are some tips that you have for maybe athletes to help them meet like their nutritional and fueling needs without adding extra stress to their already kind of busy training schedule?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this definitely is related to the first question for sure, because I think that when you are busy and you have a busy schedule, food is sometimes just not the priority. And so it's just tough. So I think, again, leaning into the stuff that works for you the best in that moment is so key for that. So I don't have a busy training schedule myself right now, but I do have a busy schedule and I have 2 kids. So I feel like I'm always doing something. I work a lot. So for me, just as an example, Reilly mentioned my lunch plates earlier, and that's something I'm obsessed with, lunch plates. And it's all usually stuff that either required no cooking or minimal cooking, or I prepped it and I'm using it for the entire week. And I do love them, but I also like home cooked hot meals too. But at this moment in time, I've just kind of accepted that these are the meals that work for me the best. They're the easiest to plan for. They're good every time. So I think that really leaning into that sort of mindset, when you find some meals and snacks and whatever that really works for you, make sure you always have them available. Make sure that your grocery order has them on there and that kind of a thing. I also think another thing that's so helpful for a busy schedule that sometimes we forget about is just the amazing availability that we have for like food delivery and grocery delivery and stuff. So I think that that's so key too. Let's say you're an athlete and you're traveling or something, you can place a grocery order literally on your phone, like when you're on your way back, and schedule it to be delivered or picked up when you get home or when you get back. Or I know you can even like get stuff delivered to hotels or anything like that. So I think even just leaning into those like convenient things is really helpful.
We definitely feel guilty, I think, when we don't grocery shop in the perfect way sometimes. I love what you just mentioned. We actually did that exact same thing like a week ago. We were going to a wedding in a different city. We were getting in late. We needed to go to the grocery store. We needed to get diapers, dog food, just, snacks, things like that. And instead of going to the grocery store and making it a whole thing, I could just order it in the car and it was dropped off. And it was so, so easy.
It's the best.
Similar to those grocery pickups and things like that, those convenience items at the grocery store that I think are maybe sometimes a little bit pricier, like a pre-chopped onion or like veggies that have already been pre-chopped and things like that, that sometimes, like, I hate chopping onions. So for me, it's worth it to pay a couple extra dollars to get my onion pre-chopped because 1, I know that's going to save me time, but 2, I know I'm way more likely to actually cook the meal if that component has been like taken away. Like I don't have to worry about chopping an onion or something like that. And I know that there's like those great things on Amazon that can chop your veggies and your onions and stuff like that. So like using tools to your advantage like that is another thing that like can really help take away some of that like added stress that we feel when it comes to grocery shopping, cooking, and preparing meals.
Yes, definitely. And just about the pre-chopped thing, because I'm such a fan of pre-chopped vegetables. And I think that if that's another kind of source of guilt for people, I think, is like, why am I going to spend another dollar on bagged cut broccoli when I can just buy the broccoli and chop it myself? But the fact of the matter is that if it sits in your fridge and goes bad, that is way more wasteful than the extra dollar you spend or the plastic that's on the, plastic bag or whatever. So I think that can be so helpful. And again, it's finding a balance. Maybe there's some veggies that you don't mind prepping, but chopped stuff is so helpful.
To add on to that too, like I loved a pre-chopped frozen onion or like a pre-chopped frozen garlic, because I'm not going to always use the entire onion, or I'm going to use the entire thing of garlic in a recipe, and then it sits in my fridge and goes bad. But if I do the frozen option, I can have a couple things and I can put it back in the freezer and just grab it when I need it.
Yeah, I love that too.
So actually I was having this conversation yesterday with an athlete and client. She was talking about how she's always on the go. So a lot of her fueling and a lot of her snacking happens in the car. I think this happens for a lot of us. Like we want easy to grab things, whether we're in the car or we're not. Jamie, what are some of your favorite easy grab and go options?
That is another thing that can be so tough. I personally think that you can make anything grab and go.
Okay, I like it.
Really do. I'm not opposed to like bringing a little Tupperware in the car of like, especially like snacky stuff like crackers, slices of cheese sticks, nuts, fruits. Like I feel like you can make just about anything, portable at least. But I think stuff like, I'm a big fan of not leaning on stuff like protein shakes when you can help it, but even just something like a protein shake and a banana as to hold you over until, the next meal or whatever, or something like that. Or even like if you need other protein sources, like I love dried edamame or stuff like that, like stuff that you can at least have the bags and you don't have to do any prep and things like that, I think can be so helpful.
Reilly, do you have particular snacks that you go to that your favorites for like easy travel?
I love the protein shake option too. I think that's great. I usually say like a protein shake is a plan B. We want to have a plan A, but like a plan B is a great option. So a protein powder, especially like if you're flying, like, on an airplane or something like that, you can put protein powder in a container and then you just fill it up with water once you go through security. I also love like beef jerky sticks. Those are super convenient for protein, like cheese sticks, kind of like what Jamie mentioned. Yogurt. Personally, I've been doing like a lot of yogurt pouches or a lot of like drinkable Chobani yogurts because I have no hands right now with a newborn. So just things like that. What about you?
My go-to, and I say this all the time, is applesauce and those little like twist off lids. Same thing with like the little yogurts and things like that. And then my biggest one is always cheese sticks because you can grab them. Typically they stay pretty good for a couple hours, even outside of a fridge. You don't need to like pack a cooler or anything like that. Cheese sticks are my go-to with like travel and things like that, just for like a quick source of a little bit of protein. And I think they're delicious. So cheese sticks and applesauce. So I'm basically a toddler.
Yeah. I love those. Are all such good ones though.
What other tips do you have for clients and athletes to help make fueling simple?
I think, I feel like I sound like a broken record a little bit, but I think making fueling and making eating simple in general is just really thinking about what stuff works the best for me, what meals work the best for me, what snacks work the best for me, and really experimenting and, holding on to the things that really have worked. So paying attention to that. So if you have an easy meal that you really liked, even if it's like a matter of keeping like a note in your phone of 5 easy meals that you can consistently rely on, I think that is so key. And just meeting yourself where you're at, accepting that if you're really, really busy or whatever, you don't have a ton of time for cooking or grocery shopping or whatever, really just kind of accepting that and figuring out what works the best. One of the biggest barriers that I see for sure is just thinking that your diet has to look a particular way. It makes it worse because then you feel like no decision that you make is the right decision. So really figuring out what that looks like for you so that you can actually stay consistent with it.
One of the trends that I've been seeing a lot lately is that eat what you want and add what you need. And I feel like that kind of applies to this idea of making things simple too, because if you have something that you really want to consume, you can always, like you said, kind of back to those basics of there's my protein, there's my carbohydrate, and there's my color on my plate, that quick snapshot, like identifying which components do I still need to add to make sure that this is a balanced meal, but in a way that's simple and non-stressful.
Yeah, I love that. I use my own sort of variation of that. And I always like to say, what can I add? So if you are in the mood for whatever you are in the mood for, there's always a way to make it more nutritionally balanced, fit your plan better, or whatever the case may be. So I love that. I think there's always opportunity to, instead of saying like, oh my gosh, I want cookies and now I'm just going to have cookies and feel bad about it. There's always ways to add things and make it a better choice for you in that moment.
We focus on positive nutrition, like what we can add, not necessarily like calorie counting, where we're focusing on how can we minimize the nutrition as much as possible. We always ask all of our guests a couple of these questions, and it is the Eat More Carbs podcast. So our first question is going to be, what is your favorite carbohydrate?
Yeah, I thought about this. It is a hard question. I think my favorite carbohydrate has to be chips. And I know it's a very broad answer, but I was thinking about it and it really is probably my favorite carbohydrate is chips.
I love that. We haven't heard that one yet, I don't think.
Well, people maybe give more realistic answers like potatoes or something, but I guess
they are great.
But I love chips. I love dipping. I love dips of like any kind. So
your dip game is so strong, like so strong on the snack plate. Dip game is so strong. Do you have a specific like type of chip that you like, or is it just chips?
I think it's just chips, but I do no, I don't have a particular one. I think it's just chips of all kinds. Depends on the day. What's
your favorite pre-workout fuel?
I am super basic. If I'm going to have something before, I'll probably do like a banana. Maybe I'll have a coffee. I'm personally not into anything other than that.
Caffeine and carbs. We love it. We love it. What's your favorite post-workout fuel?
I am a big fan of timing my workouts around my meals if I can. So that's probably my favorite way to do like a post-workout fuel, is plan it so that I'm going to have a snack afterwards, and then I can just have like kind of a normal snack or a meal. So that's probably my favorite. Other than that, I don't think I have a favorite that I go to, because I usually try to do it that way.
And then this is always seeming to be the hardest question. What is your favorite pair of kicks? We're big shoe people. I think Jenna found some running shoes, but she was looking for some. So any shoe recommendations that you have?
I have been on a shoe journey recently, so I relate to this. Finding comfortable sneakers is so hard. I don't know when it became so hard, but I swear it has become so hard to find comfortable, like walking, running shoes, whatever. So my current favorites are probably my Brooks, which I know are very popular, and I don't know specifically which one because they have like a million kinds, but I don't know the name of them. But they're my favorite right now. I was just thinking I've had them for a while and I need new shoes. So I'm up for some recommendations for sure.
I feel this so strongly because it took me such a long time to finally find a pair of running shoes that I liked how they felt on my feet, because so many of them, I'd put my feet in them and I'd be like, this just isn't comfortable. And I was like, am I just being really picky about this? But no, I think that like there's been such a technical advancement in running and walking shoes that it almost like if you have a foot that has a high arch, or you walk a certain way or something like that, if like the shoe doesn't work for you, it's really unusual. But
you know what, I think that's exactly what it is that these shoes are created for like the most specific foot, and if your foot is not that, it does not work, and then you'll be like in pain while you're walking. So I totally understand.
Yes. Well, if your foot happens to be shaped the same as mine, then Nike Invincible 3s is what I found that I like to run in now. So thank you so much for being on this episode, Jamie. It's been so great to talk to you about snacking and eating in a way that is balanced, stress-free, and easy. Nutrition by addition seems to be kind of the theme, as making sure that you are consuming balanced, nourishing meals throughout your day, whether you are an athlete or maybe just an active person. For those who want to follow along with you for more simple nutrition tips, Jamie, what is the best way for people to find you, follow you, and ask you questions?
Yes, the best place is on social media, probably Instagram. It's at @the_balanced_nutritionist, or TikTok's just the balanced nutritionist. And you can also visit my website that has a nutrition blog and lots of recipes, and it's thebalancednutritionist.com.
We will leave all of Jamie's contact information as well as her website in the podcast show notes. That way you can easily find her. If you have questions for Reilly and I, you can find us on Instagram. We're at the Eat More Carbs Podcast. You can find Reilly on Instagram at reilly.beatty.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Jamie, thank you again for being on this episode of the Eat More Carbs Podcast. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.